Aloha! You are listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room, episode number 218. This episode is sponsored by the Tiki Bar T-Shirt Club, where their monthly T-shirt designs pay tribute to a Polynesian bar or restaurant from days long past. Each design is available for a limited time and will never be produced again. For the collectors out there, be sure to check out their subscription program, where they offer a discounted 3, 6, or 12-month plan, or you can always buy shirts one at a time. For more information and to check out this month's shirt, visit tikibartshirtclub.com. This podcast is sponsored by Frogtown Brewery, an independent craft brewery and tap room located in Northeast Los Angeles. Stop in and enjoy one of their excellent beers from their ever-changing, diverse menu. Tell them that Inside the Desert Oasis Room sent you and get your first pint on us. Limitations apply. For more information, go to frogtownbrewery.com and follow them on social media at Frogtown Brewery. On this episode, we are joined by Ken and Heather Pleasant. Heather is the granddaughter of the famous furniture manufacturer William Westenhaver of Witco fame. And Ken, her husband, was trained by Will himself and has been manufacturing and restoring furniture and art in that same style for the last 2 decades. We chat about all things Witco, including the history, legacy, and future of the business, and even give you tips on how to authenticate that Witco piece you stumble upon. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. If you'd like to follow our adventures, check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/PolynesianPop, where we chronicle events, bars, travel spots, cocktail tutorials, and more. And if you enjoy this podcast, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/PolynesianPop, where membership grants you early access to podcasts and videos, front-of-the-line privileges to new merch releases, as well as exclusive content, meetups, and screen credits. Alrighty, let's get into this. Grab a cocktail and join us inside the Desert Oasis Room. And give it up for my friends Ken and Heather Pleasant.
Inside the Desert Oasis Room.
Milo's back.
I'm back.
He forgives me.
Yep. You didn't make him too mad. Gotta love cats.
Yeah, I love cats.
I'm a cat guy too. That's.
Are you really?
Oh yeah.
He can tell. That's why he's up next to you.
I peg you guys as dog people.
We had a dog. We had a dog, and he was the best dog we've ever had.
Is that what's the word that I'm looking for? Is that discrimination? Because you're from the Pacific Northwest. I picture you guys as dog people.
Most people are dog people up there.
Yeah, I guess they are.
That's
I
hilarious.
think as we get older, we're becoming more cat people.
I've been a cat person the whole time.
Yeah.
I take a cat over a dog any day.
I was a dog person. And now I'm a cat
okay. Yeah, I'm a cat guy. I've had cats my whole life, and people think that cats are assholes. It's kind of why I like them.
Yep.
But also, like, they're just easier to me. I don't have to walk them every day, and I don't have to pick up their poop. I do have to clean their litter box, but yeah.
You can leave for a while,
and they're fine.
They're gonna be just fine.
You can totally leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys joining us inside the Desert Oasis Room. This is exciting for me because I think this is the first time we've had you on the show.
Yeah.
It is, for sure. We've seen pictures of the space for years, and we've wanted to visit, and we're super happy to be here.
I love it. I think it's crazy. Time flies, and I think it's crazy when I think about how long we've known each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So my daughter, who is just here, that just left, we've known each other longer than she's been alive. And she's going to be 21 this year.
Yeah.
So we go back way to the old school.
Yeah. 2002 or something like that.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. It's great. I mean, how many people can say that they've had friends that long? And I don't even remember the last time I saw you. It's been at least a decade, and it doesn't feel like it. It just feels like we picked up right where we left off, you know?
I know.
So I love it.
When did we see you last? At Tiki Oasis, maybe in San Diego?
When did you go to Tiki Oasis last?
A long time. It's been a long time. It was when it was at that vintage hotel, not the same hotel that it's at now.
Well, that was they stopped doing it at that hotel in 2005.
Yeah.
I think. Or 2004.
Oh, really?
So, no, I think the last time I saw you guys was it was a road trip that I did up north. You guys were renting out of your hotel room. Was that in San Francisco?
Did you
go when we vended at Trader Vic's last time?
Yes.
Okay, then that is the last time.
That Trader Vic's is gone now.
The last Trader Vic's we vended at was Emeryville. That's the only one we've done.
Oh, no, so it wasn't that one. But there was a San Francisco Trader Vic's. We
have never been there.
So maybe I'm mistaking the event.
I think so.
Because there was an event up there that was held at this kind of mid-century motel, and we walked to the newly opened San Francisco Trader Vic's. This is the second iteration of Trader Vic's in San Francisco, and Martin Kate was bartending. This was Forbidden Island. This was like that long ago.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure it was Tiki Oasis, San Diego, probably about.
I thought it was 2008 for some reason, but I
think it was about 2008.
So then that means I hadn't seen you in 15 years.
Yes.
I thought it was a decade. So
it's been a long time.
It's been longer. It's been a decade and a half. Well, it's great to see you again, and you guys look exactly the same. You look great.
That's
Thanks,
nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. So do you, actually.
You do, actually.
Yeah. Plus 20, right?
Yeah.
Plus 20 pounds, plus 20 years.
Yeah.
And this is great. This is gray now, so. Crazy.
Yeah. So, it's crazy to think about, like, what the tiki scene was like when we first met. It was so much smaller.
Yeah.
We weren't doing these gigantic, expensive weekenders. Tiki mugs were $20.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, if that.
That.
I remember finding them at the thrift store every weekend, 99 cents.
I did too.
50 cents.
I did too. I found some of these over there.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing is that I remember one day I just had to make peace with knowing that I'm just not going to find stuff anymore because thrift stores are so picked over. They have people that hold stuff back for pickers.
For pickers,
yeah. So you're never going to find any good stuff.
You know, I got pretty lucky, 3 weeks ago.
What did you
found a really cool Hawaiian shirt, but it was a cowboy style Hawaiian shirt, which I've never seen.
Oh, yeah.
Long sleeve.
A Western shirt.
A Western shirt, long sleeve, with Hawaiian print.
That's pretty cool.
It was very cool. I've never seen anything like it. I'm pretty sure it's homemade, but it was really cool print.
I love it.
What's the last thrift store mug we've found?
I don't know.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? See, I can't remember either. It's been so long.
Probably Trader Vic's coconut mug.
Yeah.
Because
we always pick those up.
You know what I'm buying at thrift stores these days? I'm buying jigsaw puzzles.
Really?
My friend
I'm
Leah
addicted to jigsaw puzzles.
I love puzzles. My friend Leah does that.
Yeah. Well, I love the puzzles. They're fun, peaceful, challenging.
Yes.
I like doing like somewhere between the 1,500 and 2,000 piece size, you know.
Well, do you find when you buy them at the thrift store that all the pieces are there?
That's a great question. So most of the time, yes.
Yeah.
I have had puzzles that when I finished it, there was one piece missing. There's only been one time in my life where I finished a puzzle and there were two pieces missing.
Wow.
That's pretty good odds.
Yeah,
but I've also found puzzles there that have never been opened.
Oh.
Right.
That they're still factory sealed.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, you're going to get all the pieces in that one. But I've always been a fan of jigsaw puzzles, but I just never have time to do them. It was during the pandemic when we had to stay home and everything was shut down. I just turn on YouTube and I'd put on a concert or something, and I'd sit there for hours and just do jigsaw puzzles on the table, you know?
Sounds good.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. Pandemic taught me to, like, chill, you know? Like, I used to feel like I had to be at everything, but pandemic taught me that, you know, it's okay to stay home and do nothing.
We were busy, man. It's like everybody was sitting home doing nothing, but they were shopping. And so I was,
awesome.
we were slammed. I was carving nonstop.
Ken went live with his new website. He updated his website right as the pandemic hit, and we didn't know what to expect. We thought,
I think it was a year after, because the site's been going 4 years now.
Well, it was close to that time period, and we didn't know what that meant for people shopping.
Okay.
But it turned out that everyone was home building tiki bars.
They were.
And
yeah,
it was busy.
Yeah. And you've been busy ever since, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That was a challenging time for me because when I record podcasts, I record with guests. Mm-hmm. I go to bars, and then with the vlog, like I go to events and I go out and do things. So when we couldn't go anywhere, I was like, how am I going to do this? So I just started doing phone interviews, and I created this series that I called the COVID Chronicles because it was during the COVID period. And I thought like it would be kind of cool to create that series during that time so that I can document the style of podcast and how it changed for that period. And it opened me up to talking to a lot of international people too, because it was always one of those things where it's like, oh, well, the next time you're here or the next time I'm there, I'll, I'd love to record an episode with you. But now that we're all at home, I'd be like, hey, so then the challenge was now like, how am I going to do this recording with them while they're in Germany or while they're in Canada or while they're in Australia. And I figured out so right here on my soundboard, all I have to do, plug my phone into this cable right here.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
And then I call them using WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is an app that's similar to texting, but it also includes phone and video. And so it's free.
Wow. So
I called Tokyo last week, and we recorded a podcast. Wow. Yeah. And it's just like calling my neighbor next door. It's the same.
Interesting.
And I just plug my phone into the soundboard. Now we have a way to record a podcast. And so I did that during COVID Chronicles, for that period. But that's awesome you were able to parlay that time. Is that when you quit your job?
Yeah, I quit my job 4 years ago, actually. It would be, I guess, January would have been 4 years.
So right before pandemic?
Yeah,
year before?
Year before, yeah.
Okay.
Year something before, because it would be January was 4 years. And got the kids out of college, at least as much as I wanted to pay for.
Right.
And they got...
What were you doing before?
I was a pipeline inspector.
Okay.
Yep. So I worked for a company that basically rented me out to BP and inspected their pipeline for the last 8 years. Before that, I just worked on pipelines and stuff for years.
Wow.
It was we'd been planning that transition for 20 years.
Yeah, because
we knew we were gonna transition that way, but we just needed to raise the kids first because we knew that we could eat beans and rice if it didn't work out, but we didn't want to put the kids through any financial hardship.
That's the thing, is that when you're on your own, right, you can make the sacrifice, but when you have people that depend on you,
exactly,
kids, family, and all that stuff, it changes things, and you have to be more thoughtful about those decisions. That must have been a heck of a change.
It's still a heck of a change, honestly. It is. It's bizarre. Definitely. You definitely got to be self-motivated for sure.
That's the thing, is the discipline of making yourself be productive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The good thing is you have all day long to be motivated. So if you're not so motivated at 9 a.m. and you do something or whatever, you can be motivated at 9 p.m. and still work if you want to.
I do that.
Yeah.
I do that. I'll be, if I'm lazy, if I feel like sleeping in, or if I feel like, I walk every day. I walk about 3.5 miles a day. And sometimes I'll get up and I'll think shoot, I still have to squeeze in this walk. It takes an hour. And then I'll look at the clock and I'll think, if I start working at this hour, I'll still be done by I try to put in 6 to 8 hours a day. And sometimes I'll work until midnight.
Yep.
You know? So,
Yep.
like, if I start at the end of the day, you know, I'll work until midnight.
Yep.
And I still put in a full day. So the flexibility is nice.
Yeah, it's definitely...
You have to be disciplined, though.
Yeah.
And he is. I don't like those hours at all.
No, Heather has a job also.
Okay.
Where she gets up at 3:30 a.m. in the morning, and she's home usually by
I work for the
noon.
school district, and I'm usually home around noon or 1 o'clock,
Okay.
and then I can help Ken with the tiki business needs.
Yeah.
But
we're always, I mean, like I say, it's an all day, all night thing because we get a lot of questions on Witco and stuff. And
Yeah.
answer questions all day long.
Yeah. Lots
Emails
of questions.
and messages on our Witco Decor Facebook and Instagram about identifying pieces. Which we love to do.
Absolutely.
We love that people are preserving pieces and they're still finding lots in the wild. That's one thing. We might not be finding mugs, but people are finding Witco like crazy.
I find Witco all the time.
Yeah.
The 2 days before we left to come to California, I found a Witco throne for $50.
Oh, wow.
And it was about an hour away from me. And I messaged the lady and said, "Hey, I'm interested. I'll buy that if you still have it."
Do you ever tell them
No,
you don't, because then
So I've bought
they
stuff.
could take advantage of that.
well,
right?
not only that, I don't want someone to feel bad because a lot of times they have their own story in their head
Gotcha.
about how so and so got it from Hawaii, or there's just this story, and it's like I just don't want to burst their bubble. And if they're happy
you want to
with
tell them like,
no,
that's not from Hawaii.
No,
One of them said his grandpa carved it.
Yeah,
and I honestly, I just didn't have the heart to say he didn't.
No, because your wife's grandpa carved it.
Right. So for our listeners that don't know, I know you know who we're talking to because you clicked on the title. Our friends Ken and Heather Pleasant from the Pacific Northwest in Washington. They are... So Heather is the granddaughter of William Westenhaver. I'm going to say this. Westenhaver.
Yes.
I'm going to say it wrong. Westenhaver. So is your maiden name Westenhaver?
Yes.
Okay. So
Heather Westenhaver.
Heather Westenhaver and her husband Ken, who was trained by William himself.
Yep.
So the heirs to the Witco throne.
Yeah.
If you're wondering what they are talking about, I assume that you already know since you're listening to the podcast, and the Tiki people listen to the podcast, right? So they have to know by now, but we've got to do that because someone's got to put the comments below. Hey, man, who are you talking to? How come you don't ever say, like, who's that? But and it's funny because when people come on, they say, yeah, you know what? You need to tell us who you're talking to. And I'm like, well, you clicked on the title. Their name is in the title, right? I don't put anything else other than the guest's name in the title and the podcast number. So whatever the number is going to be for this episode, 2 something, and then it will say Ken and Heather Pleasant, right? So you clicked on the title.
Clicked on it.
Right? But so I got to dumb it down sometimes. So there you go. I don't even know where to start with that, with the whole Witco thing, because I assume, Heather, you grew up in a house full of Witco.
I did part of the time. My parents divorced when I was really young. My grandfather, William Westenhaver, is on my father's side, and they shared custody of me. And my dad was a really, really young father who had me when he was in college.
Okay.
And so he enlisted my grandparents quite a bit to help him with me. So when I would go and stay with him on weekends and holidays and stuff, I was with my grandpa a lot.
So you were with him in the workshop?
Yes. I sat beside him many days with my art supplies next to him.
Did you work alongside with him?
Yeah. Yes.
Did he teach you also how to do some of the stuff that he did?
I was a little kid, so yeah, he would hand me his art supplies and my paper, and I had a little spot next to him when he would be at his easel, and we would just hang out and do art.
When my son was a little boy, when he was like, I don't know, let me think about the timing, maybe when he was like 5 or 6, I'd be out in the garage and I'd be carving stuff too. And if you'll recall, back in the day, I used to also do carvings, and I'd vent alongside you guys at some of these events. And I'd be out there carving stuff and cutting wood and all that stuff. And I'd do a lot of scroll cutting with a jigsaw, right?
Yep.
Because you have the blade that you could do that with. And my son had a little toolbox full of plastic Fisher-Price tools.
Yeah.
And he had a battery-powered jigsaw that had this little thing in it that spun that basically bounced, and so it sounded like it was cutting.
Yeah.
So if you pulled the trigger, this thing would spin on the bottom of it and go tick, 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 and just bounce on the table or whatever, right?
Yep.
So he'd be alongside of me, and I'd cut a piece of wood and I'd throw it over my shoulder, and he'd pick it up, and then he'd try to cut it with his toy Fisher-Price jigsaw.
Cute.
But then after he would do that, he'd pick it up and he'd look at it, and then he'd look at the bottom of his jigsaw like, what the hell's wrong with my jigsaw? So did you do any of that kind of stuff?
I remember being envious of how talented he was. He could draw anything, but not so much. He built his house. I mean, he had an architect design it, but everything that we were surrounded by was Witco. Every piece of trim in that house was carved.
Beams. Yeah.
All of the built-ins, like a china cabinet, entertainment center, railings, everything was carved. And the furniture was Witco. And then we spent a lot of time out in the San Juans on Guimas Island, where he built a little A-frame cabin as well that still exists, and it's all Witco.
Wow. How cool is that?
Yeah, I'll have to share pictures with you sometime. Yeah, it's spectacular.
I'd love to see that.
It's really cool, and a lot of that stuff I grew up with, our furniture that we still live with, is Witco in our living room.
Yeah.
Did your dad carve too?
Yes, he did.
So was he part of the business?
Well, my grandfather had 3 sons. He sent them all to college. My dad became a echocardiologist. Yes. And his oldest son, Jerry, was the GM for Hyatt Regency, and their youngest son, Ty, is a chiropractor. So when they would come back for summer break, they would work at the Witco factory. Ty says all he got to do was dump ashtrays and vacuum. But my dad
probably all they trusted Ty with.
Yeah, probably.
He's funny.
But my dad got to work in the painting department, so he would paint some of the big Witco plaques you see with the painted backgrounds. Yeah. He would do those. And then my dad, after I was born, my dad dropped out of college for a little while, and he worked with my grandfather doing carvings after Witco closed. Yeah. So they continued after 1978 to do a lot of local projects, restaurants, and just private homes and stuff. And my dad carved as well.
I love it. I love hearing these stories about all of these legendary artists from back in the day, like the stories I've been hearing in the past year with the Oceanic Arts guys.
Yeah.
You know, and their legacy, and like I know some of their kids, you know, so I hear stories from them as well. Before we go any further though, and before these beers get warm while they're still cold, would you like one?
Sure, I'll try one.
So this beer is a Painkiller IPA. Oops. I'll hand this over to you. All
right.
And you can pass that down. And it's made by our friends at Frogtown Brewery, who is a sponsor on our podcast. So this is a Painkiller inspired IPA.
All right, let's try it.
Let's open these up. So shout out to our friends at Frogtown. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you guys. All right.
It's good stuff.
So, you know, as a tiki guy, we all kind of have this fascination on what's different, right? Mm-hmm. My father was a theme park architect, and that's where I got my interest in all of this experiential kind of stuff. And he was an artist as well. And I remember as a kid, he used to paint. He'd paint oils, and but he wasn't like your grandfather. My dad would lock the door at his studio so that we couldn't bother him while he painted. And he had like a little art studio, a little room, and he'd paint these gigantic oil paintings that are the size of like this whole panel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because his grandfather was an artist that would he would paint also oils, and he would hang them in hotels and things like that in the Philippines. And my father had paintings that he sold them also. I don't know how or where, but I do remember seeing pieces as they'd get finished, he'd get them framed, and then he'd sell them, and he'd sign them and stuff. And I remember there were a few that I really liked, and I thought, oh, I wish he would keep that one. I'd like to keep that one. And now, like, I'm always on the lookout for them, but I don't think he wasn't like a prolific artist, and so he didn't do like a ton of art because he had a day job. He was an architect during the day.
So do you have any?
I don't have any.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because when my father died, when my parents, later on in life, when my parents retired, they separated, and my dad moved to Kentucky, and he went basically to Kentucky with just a bag of clothes and his car, and that's it. Like everything, all his possessions, like I don't know what happened to his possessions, and so I don't have any of his art. So,
have you seen any at all since?
Not
when
since.
You search for
No,
the
I mean,
name,
there's photographs, right, from when I could pull up a shoebox with a bunch of old photographs, and there's photographs of his art, that after he'd finish a piece, we'd take a photo of it. But it's, it's a faded yellow photograph today,
Yeah.
But, so that's it's kind of cool that you're able to see the stuff that your grandfather did.
I am so lucky, and I know I am. I feel,
and I love that he has a legacy that people really, really admire.
They do, and I feel like it's part of mine and Ken's responsibility to keep spreading that legacy and keep talking about him and teaching people about all of the art that he did. And
there's definitely more than just Witco decor. I can't count how many paintings we have.
Yeah, oil paintings, watercolors,
in all different styles, all different. It's just crazy.
Yeah,
I mean,
screen printing.
Yeah, screen printing. He did it.
We have etchings. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
The amount of work that he did. And Witco, I mean, he designed thousands of pieces just within the first couple years. That's what he did.
Wow.
He was just constantly sketching new ideas. And recently we cleaned out his storage unit and opened up a couple boxes that we had never opened.
Oh, wow.
So we're discovering new things all the time.
Very cool stuff.
Little sketch ideas of, the moment he decided, I'm going to make this chair with this ornately carved woman on the back. Little sketches like that on napkins, on scratch paper.
Yeah.
And we'd always wondered, I mean, it's like, gosh, some of this stuff has to exist. And we were just lucky we found it. I mean,
I'm sure there's tons that...
Yeah. We haven't even went through all of it yet. It's crazy.
I'm sure it's just scratches the surface, honestly. I'm sure that lots of that doesn't exist anymore, but we're really lucky to have what we do. And my grandmother clipped a lot of newspaper articles.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I have books and books that I pull from to do research when I do go around and speak about his legacy. I'm able to answer a lot of questions that I never asked him while he was alive, just dates and events. And I've spent the last few years just kind of putting the puzzle together, and it's interesting. And it's really cool to feel like I can go up in our attic, open a box, and we kind of get him back for a minute. It's like he's there and I can ask him. And
that was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah.
Like one of my questions was going to be, does he feel like he's alive again?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. So I don't even know where to start. I have, saying what you've said. So you do you do a lot of presentations or lectures about him?
I've done a few. I would like to do more. I've spoken in Atlanta at Inuhele a couple times.
Okay.
I'm going to be speaking at TikiCon in Portland this July. I'm doing a private event up near where we live in the Pacific Northwest this summer as well. But that's really it. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Not that many.
Hopefully,
I would like to do more. It's just hard to get away. I have another job, and then I help Ken with the tiki business, and our website is super busy. We get a lot of business, which is awesome, but it doesn't really allow us to get out much.
Yeah, that's why it's really hard to make these events.
It's a blessing and a curse, right?
It is. I mean, just to be able to come. I mean, I can't believe we're down here, honestly.
I can't believe you're down here. I know. I'm happy that you guys are down here.
We're happy too.
But that's all the reasons probably why I haven't seen you in so long. It's good to be busy. You know, it's good to be able to do that. So another question I have is, I know that there were catalogs. So in addition to the stuff that was not in the catalog, are you cataloging all of those as well? Because it'd be nice to just for history's sake to document everything that was made.
So we don't have we know about lots of pieces. We don't have every single piece to that puzzle. I think one of our goals, though, is to create a collector's edition so that people could flip through it and look pieces up and identify it themselves, because I know everyone wants one, and we just don't have time to answer all these questions. It takes a lot of time and research, and it takes away from our actual production. And I think
our goal is definitely to get a collector's book out there for people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And have everything cataloged.
Yeah.
So when you guys are creating pieces for a marketplace or for an event, are you trying to reproduce some of the vintage pieces, or are you just doing them in the style and just creating new?
Well, both. I'm doing both. Yeah. Yep. Definitely we do a lot of the old designs for sure. Try to.
Like at Hardcore Marketplace this last weekend, you did a few of Grandpa's designs, right?
Yep.
Which ones?
Oh, we had the World there and the Fire Dancers. Everybody
Luana.
Luana. We did a Luana.
But also Ken designs lots of new pieces, and I design lots of pieces too. We try to do like some just holiday items and little plays on things that Grandpa did, but we change them maybe with a different paint color palette. Also, the one thing we do a lot of is we make a little bit smaller versions, because Witco, as you know, the pieces are gigantic, and people run out of space. Yeah. And
do you think the pieces are big? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Do you think the pieces are big because of the style of carving?
Yes.
Because
chainsaws.
It's hard to make smaller pieces.
There's not a lot of detail, especially after you burn everything. It's really hard to actually keep a lot of detail unless you're carving big and deep. You know?
Yeah.
And then you get your detail stays after you burn it. So, and bigger's easier. It's harder to work with on backgrounds because your backgrounds become so big and your frames and stuff. But as far as carving goes, it's way easier to carve something bigger than it is to try to shrink it down and
all the little
small
details and stuff.
Yeah, because they kind of disappear.
And Witco didn't need a lot of that little detailed carving because the wood we use is so
has a ton of wood grain.
It's got so much deep wood grain that it looks very complicated.
Right.
Even if you don't carve much on it.
Are you guys using swamp cedar? He was using swamp cedar, right?
He called it swamp cedar, but it's just, it's just
cedar.
It's just cedar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. The swamp cedar sounds exotic.
I'm not sure.
It sounds interesting.
It does
right?
sound
and that's what he would say.
I think he just made that up.
But I have a guy who mills it for me.
Big, thick.
This is interesting because I always thought swamp cedar was like a specific kind of cedar.
It may be. I think there is. There's a lowland or swamp cedar. Mm-hmm. I'm just not sure it's actually what he used.
Okay.
Like it's.
Why do you say that?
Because we live about 30 minutes from Grandpa's factory, so we're using the same kind of wood that he used. it grows there. We have it milled there.
Okay.
And it's just cedar to us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, swamp cedar is a thing. I just don't think it was a Witco thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you carved this guy for me.
Yeah.
Let's see, that was delivered to a house that I lived in 2003. So that was at least 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly, because it's based on the Kahiki Moon Tiki that I did.
That's right.
And that was end of 2002, beginning of 2003 when I did those.
Right. That's why I knew the time frame, because where I was living, I still envision, I could still see it in my head when it was delivered, and me trying to roll it into the house.
It's heavy.
It was heavier then than it is now.
I bet.
It's probably dried out.
It's all dried out now. And I remember unrolling that thing, and it smelled heavenly.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't smell like anything now.
Yeah.
And it probably does, like if I stick my nose in there somewhere, or maybe give it a little torch or give it a little whatever.
Yeah.
But it's unfinished. When I mean by unfinished, I don't mean like incomplete. What I mean is there's no finish on the exterior.
Didn't put a finish on it.
There's no finish on it, right? So the burning that you put on that thing, like, look at that grain.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes it's a shame that a lot of the original Witco pieces are so dark, you don't see that grain.
Yeah.
They get bleached out a little bit.
If you throw it in sun, they'll bleach out pretty quickly.
Okay.
And depending on how light you want, light through a window will definitely bleach them out and bring out.
Because I've seen pieces in people's homes, you can see the grain, you can see the texture of the grain, but you can't see the grain underneath the color of, whatever finish is on it.
Yep.
It definitely varies.
It does vary. There are some that are really light, and then in the beginning he was using a different wood too that doesn't really have a good wood grain at all. It's just a dark wood.
1962, I think.
Yeah,
he used alder as well.
Yeah, and it just doesn't really have a grain.
So this one behind me is by Bosco, and that's made out of redwood.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's found a way to kind of emulate that grain using redwood.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So,
which is same family.
Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
okay.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What are your thoughts about if someone finds like an old piece? What are your thoughts about when they restore it?
So to me, depending on how bad it is, I honestly, if it's just a wooden piece of Witco, no backgrounds, no nothing.
Like a stool or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny you say like a stool, because I have an example that I was going to use.
I would literally take it outside and spray it down with a water hose to get all the dust, because you know how Witco is.
It's really dirty in all the crap.
Yeah.
I'd spray it down and then
let it dry completely.
And put Howard's Feed and Wax on it. And to me, that's not necessarily restoring it. It's just putting some
replenishing
oil
it
back into its dried out wood.
Replenishing it. Yeah, you're not really restoring it if you're doing it that way. So here's what I'm getting at. Go ahead.
Yeah, so restoring it, I would not restore. I would not reburn a Witco.
Okay.
Because
or how about the people that like restain it, re-shellac it, varnish the hell out of it?
If it's got big white marks in it or chunks out, then I would use a black stain or even a Sharpie to try to.
Because the interior is such a light color.
Yeah, because it'll be lighter.
Like a big chip out of it, you don't want that.
I would try to stain that darker to match the whole tiki, but
you wouldn't go over the entire thing.
No, so I've restored a few of them completely where I reburn them and redo the whole finish, and you lose that much more detail again because you're burning
right, because you're burning it again.
Yep, and also if it's an old Witco, it tends to splinter more. It's not a nice smooth finish like it was the first time. Like, for instance, I redid a table for Martin Kate, a coffee table for them, and it was actually a pain to get it to look good because of how it turns out. So I really wouldn't advise somebody to reburn and do that. I would say definitely if there's white spots knocked out or whatever, just stain them and
try to blend them.
Yep, blend them as.
So here's the question that I have, and this is why I'm asking you. So when the Tiki opened, Ray Buin used bar stools from the luau because they had closed before the Tiki opened. And he got all the bar he got like a dozen of them, and he used them in his bar. They were used in the Tiki up until just a few years ago when they were finally replaced. These things, I don't know how they made it like 60 years, 50 years or 60 years, 60 years, because they were duct taped and screwed and duct taped and screwed, and you sit on them and they're wobbly and all that kind of stuff. But they're pieces of history. Right? So when they were removed from the bar and replaced with brand new stools, just like these in the Desert Oasis room, those are the kind of stools they use now. These vintage stools, I got a pair.
Oh, nice.
Regulars got first hands on them, right? And another guy got a pair, another one of the regulars. And he stripped all the duct tape off of them, and he put all new screws in them, and he sanded them down, and he re-varnished them, he redid them. They look brand new. And then when I got my pair, Senior asked me, so are you going to do what so-and-so did to his? And I said, hell no, he ruined them. Because to me, the history is all in the patina. And I didn't want to remove all of that.
It has layers of it.
Yeah. So I guess that's what my question is. What are your thoughts about when they find an old Witco bar, or I get it, they want to pretty it up.
Yeah.
But you're almost I don't know. There's that conundrum, right? You get an old house, you can't just leave an old house to be a derelict old house. But
well, your pieces are pretty, coming from where they did means something. Whereas the bar, I'd say the Witco bars, they don't necessarily, it just comes from somebody's house or whatever.
Right.
So there's really no history
provenance
to it.
And history.
Where yours
at the Tiki
you've got a history, they were at the Tiki, and
right.
I totally understand not.
Yeah, when they told me that he did that to his stools, I audibly gasped. and I was like, oh my God, he ruined them. Why did he do that?
Yeah.
And then they actually laughed, and Senior laughed at me and said, what do you mean he ruined them? He restored them back to original. And I said, that's not original. Yeah. That's, that original was, when they came from the luau, they didn't use the stuff that, that's not original anymore.
I guess it's a personal preference, but sure. I know that for us, we leave things alone as much as we can.
As much as possible.
We try to we try to clean things really well, but other than that, no.
I would replace screws too. If I want to use it and it be safe, I would replace screws and stuff.
I guess the way that I see it is if someone found an old Egyptian sarcophagus, and rather than dust it off as best as they could and cleaned it as best they could, if they took plaster and started repairing all the parts that were chipped off and took paint out and started repainting the sarcophagus,
right,
yep, are you restoring it, or are you just ruining it?
Yeah. You're completely changing
You're
it.
definitely changing it.
That's how I feel about my stools from the Tiki.
Yep.
So
which stools are they?
I can bring
a really narrow neck with a head, or are they
no, they're
just
standard,
the kind with the carved out?
No, they're just standard rattan bar stools with a red vinyl cushion.
So they're not Witco.
They're not Witco.
Oh, I thought they were Witco.
They're from the luau, Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I understand what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question is,
Same
what are
deal.
your thoughts about?
Same deal.
So my thought is all the duct tape over the years, and there's all different colored duct tape from each time they tried to repair it.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think I see what I would not fix those.
But you're also
the history.
Yeah.
You're very passionate about Tiki history. These types of things are very, very special to you, and maybe someone else that might bring something in their home wants it to be. They just don't care so much about that. They want.
I'm not going to use them in here.
Yeah.
Because they're too valuable to just.
Right.
They are falling apart, and one of them. So I got a pair, and one of them has a split on top, or the vinyl split, and so you can see into the cushion, and so Senior gave me an extra seat top.
Oh.
So I could just take the old one off and put the new. Well, it's not new, but it's not split.
Right.
It just came from another stool that actually fell apart.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, here's an extra one. So if you want to replace the one that's split, and I'm like, I just like it the way that it is. That's the way it. You know what I mean? That's the history.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't want to like restore away the history.
Right.
You know?
No, I understand.
Yeah,
that.
I get it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We'd probably do the same thing, honestly.
Yeah.
We don't really mess with our. We do have one. We have a living room set that we've had for years that we bought off eBay. That came to us in a lot poorer condition than we were expecting, and we put it in one of our outbuildings, and we haven't restored it. And we probably will make some changes to that.
We'll definitely, because it's not usable.
And what's different with you guys too is, I mean, like
we know how to do it.
You know how to do it.
Yeah.
And you're the family that's doing it.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, like if it was me, just some schlub just wrecking a Witco, that's a different thing. But like that's within your pedigree.
That's true. We do know which upholstery belongs on it, and
so it would be done properly.
Yes,
you know?
That's true.
That's like an old Model T being restored by the great grandson of Henry Ford. Like it's not like my next door neighbor who bought the Model T at a swap meet and then he wants to restore it. Like Henry Ford's great grandson is restoring it. Like there's a difference.
Yeah. That's true.
We do a lot of replacement pieces. The outrigger. The outrigger's always missing the outrigger piece. And matter of fact, we brought one down here for a lady.
So you have people like they commission you to, this piece is gone.
Yep. Just redo. Yep.
Like a fire dancers. Like maybe there's one missing.
I could do that. Yep. They have the fish. The little fish guys. A bunch of fish, and the fish were broken or missing. I've replaced fish on stuff.
Oars on Viking ships and
boxes for fountains. I know. I eventually will even have those available on the website. It's just a matter of finding time to get it all.
Yeah.
But I've redone boxes and fountain pieces,
cool.
And the bowls are a little bit sketchy because they're wood. They're eventually going to crack no matter what.
It's kind of a liability.
How does the wood? I assume there's a liner in there.
Some of
them, but
or were they just varnishing them?
They were just and then it's cedars, which cedars does well with water.
Okay.
Eventually it rots, but it takes a long time.
But they crack too. The cracks are the problem. Is when they start drying and cracking out. Then
this tiki that you carved for me. Mm-hmm. It was perfect when you shipped it, and then within the first, it only was like a week.
Yeah,
it had got a big check down the back, like all the way down, and opened up like a good half an inch.
Oh yeah,
and I thought, oh my God, and you could see like the unfinished plain looking wood inside.
So a lot of them do that. Even Witco does that, and
vintage Witco.
Yeah, vintage Witco. And there's a trick where you just get black spray paint.
Spray it into the crack and then wipe the surface.
Spray it. Well, with his, he doesn't have a finish, so I would definitely the way I would do it is spray into the crack, but try to keep either
cover
tape or something on the outside, so you're darkening the inside.
That's what it is. I'll show it to you after we finish this.
And Grandpa even had a...
it said that in his book.
Yeah, in all the catalogs, there was a sheet that described how to remedy anything like that happened. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I figured it was just because it came from the Pacific Northwest where the air is more moist and comes down here to Southern California.
Dries out.
It's a desert. Our air is more dry, and it just dried out.
Yeah, it happens all the time. We bring pieces in inside just to dry them out a little bit sometimes before we use them, and you can hear them all through the night popping and cracking out. We'll have them lined up out in our living room.
Yeah. And you can even, doesn't matter how long they dry out, they still crack more. It's just the way it is.
Especially the full logs.
Yeah.
Like that.
The flat stuff's not as bad. The masks and stuff, they're not quite as bad about cracking and checking too bad. Luckily, because a lot of those are on the wall, But with the poles, it's hard to keep them from cracking.
So while I have you guys here, and this just popped into my head, but I thought it'd be kind of helpful for our listeners that are interested in collecting or looking for Witco. What are some of the things that you can tell them to look out for if they're curious about identifying the authenticity of something that they have? Are there markings?
There's not a lot of I mean, some of them have tags. On the wall plaques, there's almost always
in big grease pencil
a number on it,
a W dash and then the item number,
or it can be
usually
or it can be any letter. He had other letters
he did, but a lot of times it's a W
because everything has a
I figured out
number.
What the W means, but what about the other letters? What are the
sometimes
I think there's a WL where for Witco lamps, it's just whatever.
I think he just ran out of numbers and changed them towards the end.
So everything had an item number.
Yeah.
And usually on plaques, it's on the back of the plaque.
It always would have had a paper tag as well, but mostly those are lost.
Yeah.
Sometimes with the older pieces, there's a little brand.
Yeah, there's some branding on some of them.
Abstract W and cursive ITCO ink.
Yep.
And that was what they were called early on, incorporated, and they dropped that later. So if you find a piece with that, it means it's usually before 1960.
It's an older piece.
I think so. Or something like that. I don't know exactly, but it's older.
Yeah. And then too, like, it's definitely not a Witco if you look at it and say it's a flat wall mask and all of it is carved exactly the same depth, because it's if that's the case, then it's probably been done with a router.
Right.
And it's not a Witco.
Yeah.
Because Witco used a chainsaw, and on all their masks, your grooves in your mask and stuff are going to be different depths because they can't hold their chainsaw perfectly at the right level all
Peaks
the time.
and valleys and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So anything routered is not Witco. I mean, you can usually tell the difference between a router and a chainsaw.
And they didn't use. We get a lot of questions about cats.
Yeah.
There's another company that did cats really similar. Those freestanding ones that sit on a table that look similar to Witco. If they have plastic eyes, they are not Witco.
Plastic, googly eyes.
Witco did not use plastic.
No. But if they have pegs, Witco used a lot of pegs in the eyes, wooden pegs. They used tiles, ceramic tile in the eyes for a lot of stuff. Then those are probably Witco. But if they've got plastic eyes, then they're not. And
when he was making these pieces, did he have helpers that were making them too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they would carve in his style.
Yeah. So what he would do is he would make the design. He would carve one, then a prototype, make a template, and then the carvers. That's what they went by, and then they would just reproduce it over and over and over.
So the high point of Witco, he could have had 7 carvers out there all carving all day.
6 or 7 carvers.
And then he had another section of the warehouse where people were working with metal work, another section painting,
boxing, wrapping.
Yeah, shipping. He had giant kilns. He had a giant lumber yard. So there's a lot of Witco, vintage Witco.
The kilns were to dry the logs or dry the wood.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you said like 7 carvers, up to 7 carvers carving all day, I immediately felt my back go.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
What's
Ask
crazy
Ben about that.
Yeah. So when Bill taught me how to carve, we used the Witco chainsaws.
And they were like old school.
They're
heavy.
They're electric chainsaw. They're corded, and they're an electric chainsaw, and they're all metal. Every bit of them is metal. So they're like the old. I think it's Craftsman or something.
They're really cool.
They are. They're really cool, shiny, chrome-looking metal, but there's no plastic on them, so they are heavy. So when he taught me, he had a pulley system he had rigged up at the factory too, and literally you clip the chainsaw on, and it had these weights over here that would take the weight off the chainsaw, and then you're sitting here trying to carve with this cable, basically.
Wow.
And he had it down. I mean, that's what I learned on.
So that's how he did it.
Yeah.
That's not like a thing. That's something that he engineered to make it easier.
Yep.
Yes.
So they could actually do it all day. And I used that for quite a while. And finally, I resorted to a cheap plastic lighter chainsaw and got away from the pulley system. And it was still electric, corded, but now I'm got away from that and I'm on to cordless chainsaws. So
yeah,
and they're light also.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Well, we have the technology of the 2000s, right? Of the 2023. Yeah. To where we can take advantage of like our technology.
Absolutely.
We're not wielding all this old heavy stuff from before.
So I got them all hanging on the wall now. I think I have 3 of them from the factory, and I have them all in my shop hanging on the wall.
Yeah. They're really cool. They have Grandpa's
cool.
writing. He etched scraped into it. It says Witco decor.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to send me a photo of that. I want to see a photo of that.
I got an old drill that's got Witco decor etched into it and stuff. And
yeah, whatever old photos you have, I'll include with this episode.
Okay. Yeah.
I think people would be interested.
I have some really
that.
cool black and whites of the factory, of the kiln, and
I'd like to see all
of
that.
the carvers and stuff. I can send to you. Yeah.
Do you know what happened to some of those carvers? Did they end up breaking off and doing their own things?
Some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Witco was a big employer in our community.
Okay.
We actually run into people around town who will be like, oh, my dad worked there, my grandfather, or they were the biggest employer for a while.
In Mount Vernon, Washington, they were the biggest employer for a little while.
I think they had 70 or 80 employees at one time. And it's a little town.
That's huge.
Yeah. And it's just such a different business to be up in that area. It seems like Grandpa moved up there from Southern California, but you would think something like that would be down here where all of the tiki stuff is.
Right.
But it made sense up there. It was his idea to do wood carvings because that cedar was so plentiful and it was so cheap.
Yeah,
it was
back then it was considered
garbage wood.
Yeah, it was garbage wood because structurally it's not that great for building.
It's so soft.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And now it's outrageously expensive.
Yes, it is.
What brought him up there in the first place?
He actually went to Huntington Beach High School.
Oh, he did?
Yes, he dropped out at 17 and joined up in the Navy to fight in World War II. He was stationed out in the South Pacific on a floating dry dock. When the war was over, he moved back, got married, had a couple kids, was enrolled in LA Art School.
Okay.
Got his GED. Then he got the military paid for him to go to college.
Bill, yeah.
And he was working in the oil business, but painting on the side. And he was doing work for magazines and advertising and stuff. His cousin was up in where we live in the Pacific Northwest and had started an import art business called Witco Decor, Western International Trading.
Actually, then it was just called Witco.
Yeah.
With Western International Trading Company.
Yes. And they wanted my grandpa to go up and work with them. And Grandpa carved a little tiki idol out of a bar of ivory soap, shipped it up there. It was the Big Joe, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a really simplistic totem, like 3 heads stacked upon each other. And they loved it.
Oh yeah,
Grandpa,
I know that one.
Yeah,
I think I have a mug of that.
Yeah,
you probably
Ken made a mug.
Yeah,
I have a Witco style mug up there. Now that I look at it,
that's
it's not
a fortune god. Yep.
Yeah.
This was in that same time period. Ken did a mug.
Yeah.
I don't think I was able to get that one. I think it sold out.
That was the very first one we ever did with Monkey.
Miles did it.
Miles did it.
Yeah. Anyway, he carved that. They loved it. He went up to Washington, carved it for. Actually, they had one carver, I think, that he taught Grandpa how to carve. Carved the Big Joe, 6 feet tall, cedar, big. Like, what would you say the dimensions were?
12 by 12 by 6 feet.
Ken's carved them. They're huge. 12 by 12.
Yeah.
That's gigantic.
Yes.
I haven't carved a 6. I'm supposed to carve a 6-footer. I've carved some 4-footers out of 8 by 8, but I've literally have 2 12 by 12s, and I'm supposed to do one.
They're gigantic.
They're huge. They're monsters.
So after he carved the Big Joe, Everyone loved it. He brought it all the way back down to Southern California and brought it to a show. It was like an interior furniture design show, and presented it, and it was the hit of the show. And from then on, the orders just started pouring in, not for any of the imported art that his cousin was doing, but all of Grandpa's designs. And that Big Joe is what started the whole thing. And so then he moved my grandma and my dad and my uncle up there to Mount Vernon, and everyone's been up there ever since.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. And then showrooms just sprung up all across the country. Midwest, Beverly Hills, East Coast.
Yep, Chicago.
Yep.
That's interesting. I love that he wasn't the one that started the Witco brand.
No, but what's funny is the two other partners, within that first couple years, he was the owner.
Yeah.
They both said, "Okay, pay me out. I'm leaving."
Yeah.
And he took over, and he made it into a huge company.
Yeah.
And that it was only his. I mean, he had some other designers later on, but he designed so many things. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the Will Rongo, right?
That's later.
That was later. Okay.
Yep.
That's after 1965.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was just a series of some wall pieces that he enlisted Gordon Robb and Ronald Hovde. They were his friends, but they also worked for him. And those were pieces designed by the three of them.
Gotcha.
And they combined the name.
Right.
Although you will find worlds that say Will Rongo on them every once in a while.
But that's wrong.
Yeah, and it wasn't. It was actually, the world was before.
Way before.
Yeah.
So why are they marked that way?
Someone in the factory mislabeled
It's
them.
so
gotcha.
funny. You can find 6 of the same Witco pieces, and they are so different. It's crazy.
Because
Really?
different people made
different
them.
people carved them.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
they're, it's so bizarre how different they look. I mean, they're mostly the same,
Similar.
but they're always
The
different.
template Grandpa would make. So they're similar, but then a carver, especially, he did not like hiring artists at all, because they'd always try to put their own little
They
spin.
always want to put their spin on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll find that a lot.
Yeah.
I think too, as the years passed, maybe they redid their templates or whatever, and they would forget a piece that was on the old one or whatever, because there's wall plaques and stuff that are literally
Like
completely different. Actually,
they missed a whole section with
like
the
the
chainsaw.
face is gone. Like what is it called?
Conversation.
Yeah, the Conversation. There's another one. Oh shoot, I can't remember what it's called now. But it's literally, it's different. I mean, it's completely different.
Yeah.
So I've redone them before, and I'm like, well, geez, I've got these pictures and they're completely different. Which one do I do? You know,
Kind of pick your middle
yeah,
ground.
you do. You kind of mix them together and make it. So, yeah.
Or you
Septic
try
Legends,
to
that's what it was called.
You try to look at both of those and you try to interpret what you think
He meant to do.
he meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
The design that he gave them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So are you, can we talk about the new mug that you have coming out?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. And then, so I know that it's based on some of the stuff that you made that you showed me at the Hardcore Marketplace.
Yeah.
So are you sculpting any of that?
I'm not. I'm literally, what I do on mugs usually is I will do a carving. It's like for Big Joe with Miles. I did a Big Joe carving for Miles, a little 3-footer, and I sent it to him.
Okay, and then they reinterpret
he sculpted it, based on the carving. And the same with the mug you have up there, the Fortune God. I sent him a carving. Oak Wash did a Mainlander style fountain, or Mainlander, Fisherman God style fountain. Everybody calls it the Mainlander.
Yeah, because what came first?
The Fisherman God came first.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
The Mainlanders stole it.
They took the
had
design,
it. They had Grandpa's piece in their restaurant, and then they adopted it for all their for all their menus and their barware and their napkins and their mug.
Yeah.
They took it. So then everyone started calling it
the mainlander.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is that if you call it the mainlander, I know exactly which one you're talking about.
I know, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's
true.
what's funny is I don't call it the Fisherman God usually. I call it the mainlander.
Well, but
everybody knows
when we made the mug, though, we felt like we should name it what Grandpa called it.
You should, absolutely.
It was a Fisherman
That's
God.
what he would want you to call it.
Right.
Yeah.
He might actually be angry if you called it the mainlander.
He might.
Yeah.
He might say, hey, wait a second.
Yeah.
Why are you calling it that? Yeah, I was just curious, like, if you had worked with clay and how different that was from what you're normally used to doing.
Clay is so hard to deal with.
We've
Because
messed around, but it's hard for
we
me.
leave it to the experts.
Yeah. Well, for some people, it's easy. For
Not
some people,
for
they
us.
just really knock things out with
They
it.
do.
But then, the mentality is different too. So, like a sculptor will say when they make a mug, they're taking the clay and then they're building it into the shape that they need it to be. A carver subtracts from what they have to make what they want it to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So they'll look at a log and they'll see the tiki inside the log, and then they remove things to make it that shape, where it's the exact opposite
on clay.
for a sculptor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Where they start with like just a lump, and then they build from there.
Right.
And so it's a different thing. I was just curious if you'd tried both because.
Oh, I've tried a little bit, but it's pretty hard. Just like the pendants, even pendants for me. I mean, I do little carvings every once in a while, and I'll be honest, I can do a 4-foot carving way faster than I can do a 2-inch carving.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, because also that's a different kind of skill. You got to use hook knives.
Yeah. It's just
I've done a little bit of that, and if you're not careful, you can give yourself a pretty nasty gash.
Oh yeah.
Where with the chainsaw, like you could be a lot more cautious.
Yeah.
I assume if that's the tool you're used to working.
Yeah.
With. Yeah. Wow. Well, interesting stuff, man. Where do you guys see yourselves in the next couple of years with the business?
That's a good question.
I mean, do you see yourself like doing what your grandfather did, having other helpers come in and do?
I don't.
I see us branching out into more mugs, more shirts, more prints and stuff.
Books.
And then as far as the carvings go, we'll always do carvings and have carvings. But I think we want to keep that part of it smaller and more, I don't know.
More one of a kind.
For one,
more like a finer piece of art, less.
Yeah.
I don't think we're interested in having a big company.
I'm so picky.
And
I just
plus you're probably in a little like a sweet spot right now where the business is busy enough to keep you doing it as a full-time job, and you don't want it to become specifically that, right? Where you grow it into like a bigger thing, and that just becomes a job.
Our bummer is we want everybody to have some, and unfortunately, it's really hard to make sure everybody has some.
We can't keep up, really.
Yeah, we have all these shows and stuff.
I'm glad I got my piece now.
Yeah.
So what is that? 4 feet?
Yeah, I think so.
We should measure it. It might even be.
Might be a little over.
Taller than 4 feet.
I think it's a 12-inch log too. Back when I was doing those.
Because you don't do those anymore, right?
I'll do logs, just not very often. Yeah.
A lot more narrow than that.
They're smaller now.
And not that design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That piece is in the Tiki Modern.
Is it?
Oh, not yours piece specifically, but
the Moon one is.
The picture that we showed, and you said, I want that.
Yeah.
That picture's in Tiki Modern, lined up in front of our old porch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are called butt ends. I used to go down to the log yard, telephone pole yard, log yard, and pull up in my truck, and there would be piles of, they're called butt ends. They're just the cutoffs of the poles, the fat end of the poles. And they'd get this huge forklift and just start dropping these things in my truck.
His little Toyota.
And they were cheap back then. You could, you know, but you could only haul like 8 or 10 of them at a time at the most. And I'd come back home and start carving them. And now they...
You sent me down there to get them.
Yes, I sent her down there one time. She was very happy.
She still looks angry about that.
I am. Scared the crap
I'm sure
out
it
of me.
did.
So those were the days, man, where you could get your logs for cheap. And then, like, I don't remember what I paid for that, but I know I didn't pay that much.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
I don't remember either.
Especially, like, what tikis are going for today. They're crazy today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Dude,
I mean, like, at the time when
you paid a good price for it.
I paid a good price.
Oh, yeah.
Because
you probably paid $100 a foot, maybe, right?
I think
I don't doubt that much.
I think he charged me somewhere in the $300 or $400 range.
Yeah.
And then like another maybe like $80 for shipping.
Maybe
something like that.
Yeah.
So because it was a big log wrapped in cardboard, right?
Yeah.
So it's bulky, it's heavy, and it's awkward.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, that was the glory days too of eBay.
Yeah.
So I would do a log, and I was so new to this stuff. I would do one, and I would throw it on eBay, and it was just like, you just never knew what the heck was going to happen, and it was so fun. The last 5 minutes on eBay.
Yeah.
It was just a blast back then.
Yeah. Well, seeing those numbers go
Just
up the last 5
and
minutes,
and they were like, oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different game on eBay these days.
Yeah.
We just didn't know back then that other people liked this stuff. Like Ken started carving and he'd put it on there and people would go nuts for it.
Well, I remember.
We had no idea that there were other people.
I remember the early days of Tiki Central. I remember when you were first learning and you were posting all the pictures on Tiki Central.
Yeah, so I found out about Tiki Central because I had made a mask and put it on eBay. And I don't know how.
I think Sven maybe told us.
Yeah, Sven came up and visited Bill because he was doing the book on Bill.
Right.
But I don't think
someone told us. They're talking about you over there. Yeah, they're
talking about you on Tiki Central, and I go, Tiki Central? What's Tiki Central?
Right.
So then I got on the internet and figured out Tiki Central.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, it changed Ken's life.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Every night he was on there just chatting with everybody.
Checking out all the new stuff. Every day there was so much cool stuff to see on Tiki Central.
Those were the golden years. That was when people were posting, like, there was always new discoveries.
Always.
Right?
Yeah.
Some new menu or some new mug or some postcard or some, Wicro's granddaughter or, like, it was that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, this is so-and-so. My uncle used to own the blah, blah, blah. Or my grandmother was the person who did this. Or my grandfather was the person who did that. And
And then just to see all the other guys creating stuff too.
Right.
Right.
You guys swapping tips.
Yeah.
And
all kinds of stuff,
and people being really nice to each other.
These days, it's like cultural appropriation, this and that's not tiki, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And like it's, it actually like, it turned me off so much that I disconnected myself from most of the tiki groups on Facebook. Actually, I really hate Facebook because of that kind of stuff. So I rarely post on Facebook. Really, it's just to help promote my show, but. I'll see stuff on there and I think like, you guys look like idiots. Like
it's sad, really.
Yeah, it is sad. Like arguing on the internet. Like, you think you're gonna win that argument?
No.
You're just gonna you're gonna look like a pouting little child. Both sides.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting there, you're just arguing into the void with a stranger, and you're both trying to prove each other right.
You're not
going to change anybody's mind
for eternity.
And there it is for eternity. Yeah, written.
Yeah.
It's just you look like idiots.
Yeah, it's really sad.
So I don't reply. I don't do any of that. And whether I agree or disagree, and sometimes I get really like worked up inside.
It ruins you. It ruins your mood.
And it's just like, you know what? Like, I don't want to have any part of that. And sometimes I get comments like that on my my stuff on the podcast or on the YouTube and stuff, and used to really bother me until I've met some other vloggers, like really big name vloggers with millions of subscribers, and one of them said to me, you can control that, and I was like, yeah, but he's like, no, he's like, I have an assistant. All his job is look for negativity, and anything that's negative, I delete it. And he's like, I don't want anything negative on my page. It's my page. positivity only.
Yeah.
And so I thought, yeah, I should do that. So I do that. If there's anything negative, I just delete it. You know, like I don't need to see that. And one time I was doing that, even on Facebook, like something was being criticized, a place that I went to or whatever, and I was deleting all the negative stuff. And someone said, "You're deleting comments. That's not good." And I said, "It's my page. I can do what I want with my page. You want the negativity on your page? Be my guest."
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't live like that. So.
No, it brings you down.
It brings you down.
Yeah. I tend to stay away from Facebook and stuff sometimes too, just because it'll bring me down.
We use social media.
Yeah, Heather's
and I'm the one that takes care of most of it. I don't let things get to me like Ken does. It's perfect for me to take care of that stuff.
Yeah. I like I say, if I want to carve and be in a good mood, I definitely don't get on Facebook.
There you go. Well, social media is a tool that can be used in all kinds of different ways, and you know, you guys choose to use it positively, so that's a great way to market your brand. It's a great way to to spread the style of art that you guys are doing. People love it. Yeah, and it's a great way to carry the legacy. Right?
We're lucky, and we don't really get any negative posts. Like,
now and then, I delete
much.
them before Ken sees them.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah,
and you're right, Adrian. I use it to promote our business, but I also make sure that I'm spreading our vibe. Mm-hmm. I try to always be positive. I always try to talk about our family legacy, and
you choose your narrative.
I do, and we get a lot of positive feedback because we're attracting the energy that we're exuding.
Yeah.
So it works out.
Basically, we get, like I say, we get a ton of questions. So I'm helping with questions nonstop. But yeah, for the
people appreciate
most part. Good. And then if I post a picture or a reel, my first reel a couple weeks ago,
oh my gosh.
Heather's like, "Oh geez, did you really do that?" It's like, yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have.
There it is.
I'll stay in the garage and just carve.
There it is. Well, for all of our listeners out there, thanks for listening to another episode of Inside the Desert Oasis Room. If they want to find you guys online or see any of your work, where can we send them?
WitcoDecor.com is our website. You can find us on Instagram under Witco Decor. We have an official Facebook that we share. It's Witco Decor as well. It has my grandfather's picture on it. And we share a lot of vintage tips on finding vintage Witco, helping to identify pieces. We share a lot of historical information there, and those are the places you can find us.
We have Pleasant Tiki also, but that's more mine page.
Personal.
And
that's where we can find the reel, right?
No, actually, I put it on Instagram. But for the most part, Pleasant Tiki just sits there. I don't really do much on there. Heather shares everything to it, but
awesome.
I don't
Witco Decor Facebook, Witco Decor Instagram, and WitcoDecor.com for buying pieces.
Love it.
Yeah.
And we'll put that in the description as well. If you guys are sitting at your phones or your laptops, you can just click on the link there. If you guys want to follow our adventures, we have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/PolynesianPop, and the archive for the podcast is on our website, desertoasisroom.com. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Inside the Desert Oasis Room. We appreciate you, and we bid you a cheers and aloha.